Growing up around the fall Halloween season, one of the biggest activities was to go to a haunted house. You'd pay a couple of bucks and go into a weird ramshackle room where there'd be different lights, people would be dressed in costumes, and they try and scare you. Some were really low quality and silly, where you would just walk into a room and see Michael Myers, and then in the next room, you'd see a werewolf, and nothing made sense. Some tried really hard and did a really good job. I actually worked at one growing up. People love going to these haunted house attractions, but for me, something always kind of felt off. It never really truly felt like I saw a real, true, cohesive haunted house. And part of the reason is because I already spent a lot of time in one. I'm talking the Spencer Mansion in the Arklay Mountains from the original Resident Evil. This is like a Halloween special. I want to talk about Resident. It's been a while on this channel since I've talked about an old game, so I figured now was the time. Also, I know I wore this costume last year. I'm cheating. I didn't have time to get a new costume, but I wanted to talk about Resident Evil anyway. So now, lighthearted intro aside, for me, Resident Evil 1 is literally all location, location, location. That mansion is the perfect gameplay backdrop. And I'm talking about either version of the game. For me, I had first encountered Resident Evil with 1997, the director's cut version. My mom brought it home from her job and said, hey, this guy gave me this and told me I should play it. So immediately I said, okay, I took it and played it, and I found it absolutely terrifying. It was so hard for me to get through that game. I literally needed my mom to help me. You can make fun of me, okay? But even for that game, that low poly, very simple, straightforward game, something about it was so different, and all of those rooms and that mansion managed to feel iconic and creepy and memorable. And to just a couple of years later, when they translated it over to more modern graphics, it just shows how original that first mansion really was, how important that footprint was. Because while, yes, the Resident Evil 1 remake looks bananas, still to this day, it looks completely different when you hold it up to that first game. If you were a fan of that first game, the feel is absolutely there. Every single room in the Spencer's Mansion serves some sort of a purpose or tells a story, whether it's like a direct story where you find a journal entry with the famous itchy, tasty entry, to just, you know, in the remake, finding that bedroom with footprints that lead to nowhere, that literally doesn't do anything. It just tells you a spooky story in that moment. Every room is different, distinct, and it's also a game of good-ass hallways. The original and the remake, it's a matter of camera angles, of course, the fixed camera angles, and seeing these unnerving hallways that look long, but you don't know what's in the other direction, or it's just the lighting and atmosphere to them. There's the first hallway where you encounter the first zombie, and there's just that weird sitting room at the end of that hallway with that Victorian couch. Why is that there? I don't know, but it is the perfect place to encounter the first zombie in the game, which to this day, the original in 1997, the zombie turning around, the pre-rendered cutscene of the zombie turning around, still one of the most terrifying things to this day, still fills me with dread. It's the musical cue, it's the weird look of the zombie's eyes that just is so perfect. But it's upstairs hallways, it's downstairs hallways, it's hallways with a bunch of mirrors in it that is incredibly unsettling. There's of course the famous dog hallway where you're walking and the zombie dogs bust through the windows. Just incredibly iconic with the wallpaper, the old wood furniture. I could go on and on about every room, the gallery room, like kind of art gallery room. Even if there's not too much going on there, it is still so weirdly unsettling because you're like, why does a house have a room like this? What is going on? To the parlor room with the shotgun that they kind of filled out with a little bit more details in the remake, to the taxidermy room with just like the way it's angled and the way you see these animals mounted on the wall. It just makes for like a perfect horror setting. You don't know if something's gonna jump out at you or not. Of course, the upstairs balconies with the crows where you find Forrest pecked to death, like just the atmosphere there. Where the remake really, really nails it is that area around the mansion where you're inside for a lot of it, but it's really looking out the window, seeing the thunder and lightning, finally stepping out to like that back porch area, which just, of course, happens to have a haunted graveyard. It is perfect Halloween. It is peak Halloween. And it's stuff like that that is the reason why, and I've talked about this in the past when I've done Halloween videos on this channel. I talk about games I play every Halloween, spooky horror games. Resident Evil 1 is always on that list, specifically the remake. Honestly, for some of these gorgeous pre-rendered environments. The backyard-ish of the mansion, the gardens, all that stuff is just so unsettling and so good. From the kind of torchère, kind of a lantern post light by the porch with the bugs flickering around it, to all the gravestones, to the kind of foggy atmosphere and dead trees. It's perfect. There's of course the main hall, but then there's also the area behind the stairs where you first hear Lisa in the remake, which with Lisa, just like a textbook example of a perfect addition to a remake. When we talk about things in modern remakes, especially like horror remakes, like, you know, Resident Evil 2 having little tweaks to the Dead Space remake, giving Isaac a voice and adding little twinkles of extra story and dialogue, Lisa is really like the perfect footprint for that, where Lisa added something so compelling and so interesting, but it just fit in the whole Resident Evil bio-horror thing, while also being just deeply haunted house style, spooky and unsettling. She's so gross and so also tragic, which makes the feeling of dread when you hear the chains dragging that much stronger every time. All the hallways, all the stairwells that like with the crooked angles and all the picture frames on the walls, it is peak Haunted Mansion style thing. And for me, it's that cohesive feel. This is where playing these games in my head, I was like, that's what a haunted house is. It is filled with horrors. You don't know what comes next, but like it's all just fucking awesome. I'm sorry if I'm just like fanboying. That was the point of this video. The internet needs a little bit more of being happy and excited about video games. Am I right? And then there's the save rooms, the solace that those bring. The save room is where you would save with a typewriter, dump your items, you know, check your stuff, but also generally a sense of safety. And they always manage to be little cozy rooms or caretaker rooms under the stairs or equipment rooms that always just felt nicely tucked in and safe, with really, really dreamy, still creepy, but very dreamy, lighter music. If you've never played a Resident Evil, chances are you've probably played one. You know that the save room music is a thing. I'm definitely not like, you know, doing any new revelations here, but I think it's just like, I'm just like reminiscing. It's the nostalgia thing, like experiencing that for the first time. The horror of the doors opening and then the door shuts, it fades up, and you're in a nice room, and there's a typewriter, and there's gentle music playing. There's something about that, like, relief that just really worked for the pacing of that game, and I think really set up the framework for survival horror going forward. But it is, again, like to hit on it, a haunted house. It escalates. You start to discover the Umbrella Lab, and there's like, you know, more bio creatures trying to kill you. There's a fucking evil shark that's gonna bite you. So, like any good haunted house, it does descend into madness and chaos. Like any good haunted house, you go back to your hometown or something like that. At the end of it, it just gets crazy, and there's a guy with a chainsaw for no reason, or there's like a big scary jump scare and they take your photo. Resident Evil's version of that is the escalation to the secret laboratory and the big showdown with Tyrant. And by that point, yes, like it does escalate to like great effect. It's also just becomes video game. You are a cool guy or a cool girl, and you got to kill this badass monster with claws. And for me as a kid, like that was the stuff that really appealed to me. You know, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Wesker, they felt larger than life. They felt like, in those early days, it was just like they were just cool, badass, super cop, kind of like Japanese anime heroes. You didn't really know what was going on with them. They didn't really give you a lot, but you were able to just project coolness onto them. They were stars. He's cool. He only has a knife. She's the master of unlocking. That's all you really needed to know. But it worked, I think, because the game around it was so special and unique, and also like their character, like their visuals, they just looked so unique. But going back to like that horror thing and just the uniqueness of it, it's the whole setup, right? If you're talking the 1997 one, of course, and I've mentioned this a million times because I'm obsessed with it, but the live action intro of the characters, it is the most peak 90s thing I've ever seen. I remember thinking it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I watch it today, and you know what? I still think it's really cool. I don't care if like I'm crumbling to dust at this point, but god damn it. But it's really the intrigue, the setup. Oh, hikers are dying in the Arklay Mountains. What's going on? What's with all these mysterious deaths? This badass stars team goes to check it out, and then things just kind of end up in a mad dash to this haunted mansion. And just the effectiveness, like the establishment of that foggy woods really, really works. And it worked in both the remake and the original, whether it was live action or like kind of like a found footage pre-rendered thing in the remake, right? You have tall grass, fog, dead trees, pitch black darkness, and general confusion, and the terror of these horrific zombie dogs that just worked so well. For me, it was unlike anything I had seen. I had watched some horror movies and some zombie movies, sure, but Resident Evil kind of cobbled it all together in a very different and interesting way, and I'll forever be grateful for that, and I'm always going to be chasing that high. Just a game that understood, quote-unquote, the assignment with really, really incredible survival horror gameplay, really the footprint for a lot of it going into the future, but also pacing, understanding when to use music and sound effectively with the opening and closing of the door thing, being a loading screen, yes, of course, but also just being such an effective tension builder to when that door shuts and that next room, is there some ambient spooky music playing? Is nothing playing? Is there a ticking of a clock? The music ramps up when it needs to with like a boss or an encounter, but there was really just such a like workmanlike, very simplistic use to all of this that just led to it all being really effective and not overkill. So for me, like the whole haunted house thing, and a good haunted house thing is really what your mind fills in the blanks with. Horror is subjective. Everybody feels differently about it. For me, a lot of the times it's often tell, don't show. And the mansion is a lot of that, because while it is filled with bioengineered horrors and zombies, it's also just a weird ass mansion with weird rooms that I talked about before, with a lot of unsolved mysteries. Very simple characters that you can project whatever you want onto them. The lack of insane, awesome action music to ramp up to tell you when to be excited or scared about a thing. All of it does it effectively and targeted, and I still think Resident Evil 1 to this day is a masterpiece. Whether we're talking the one from the 90s or, of course, the 2002 GameCube remake, I love them, and I'm always going to be mean to people when they say, I'm not playing that, tank controls suck, they're so bad. I think we need to gatekeep a little bit, because you know what? Who cares? It's fun. It made the game more effective and scary. I gotta relax. I'm just busting balls. But seriously, Resident Evil 1, one of the most effective haunted houses I've seen in a game for a long time. I loved the Baker residence from Resident Evil 7 for continuing that mindset. But really, for me, it all comes down to the original Resident Evil. Like, Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid were just formative years for me when I really started to fall in love with games and discover that they could be more than just running and jumping. That's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm yapping about this. I think I've definitely went on long enough, though, so I want to know what you guys think in the comments about... I'm doing the Wesker, but I want to know what you guys think about Resident Evil. I feel very fortunate. Like, I am very happy that my entry to the series was the first game. But the reality is, a lot of people, that's not the case. So I definitely want to know where you first discovered Resident Evil, how you felt about it. And let's talk about that original game, the Spencer Mansion. One of my favorite video game locations of all time. I'd love to know your favorite room, your favorite encounter, your favorite moment, anything like that. Let's talk. Thank you for watching this weird little Halloween special where I just talk about something I love. Also, if you are celebrating Halloween, have a great time, be safe, whether it's with your friends, your children, yourself, whatever. Watch a horror movie on me. I don't know. Hope you're having a great day, all that stuff. If you like what I'm doing here, where I'm just talking about stuff I love, stuff I find interesting, clicking the like button legitimately helps. Thank you. But that's it. I'm sweating because this is very hot, so I'm going to go. But I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me. Chris Redfield. Oh, this doesn't do the shit.